sorry, 1.1 is here and then 1.2 is next to it. So I'll move along across to that now. So for question 1, they gave you a nominal rate. So that was definitely one in the first question, and you had to find the effective interest rate. So this is applying that formula that we learned about yesterday. So 1 plus I effective is 1 plus I over m to the power of m. Guys, please remember you get a mark for doing that. So that's already 1 mark. Where you're summing in, you get your second mark. And then where you get your answer, that will be your third mark. Okay, so that is a 3 mark question. So it goes down, that will be 3%. So it goes down, right? Goes down, we're going to get 100 marks each. Are there any questions on that one? And guys, you don't have to even start this thing down here. You can just get it down here from a 1, 9, whatever on the calculator. You can just straight away do times 100 on the calculator and just write your answer. Okay, you don't have to actually write that step. You can obviously if you want to, all right, but you don't have to write that step down. Any questions on that first? Just a reminder, guys, remember they said that it was compound quarterly, so it's over 400 and then to the power of 4. Okay, remember in this formula, it's always the number of calculations in 1 year. Okay, so just 4 there in 1 year. The next one in 1.2 was daily, which we actually haven't done before. So using the same formula, again, we have a mark for the formula there. Yeah, now when it's 6.5% daily, and guys, we do just go on 365 days a year. Okay, you'll never have to do it each year, so don't stress about that. We're just going to assume that it's a normal year, so 365 days. So remember, it's always the number of, in this case, days in a year, and then 100. Right, then 2 zeros after that. So that's what you always put in your denominator there for your interest rate. And then again, 365 days in a year. So you put that as your exponent. You type that in and you have to minus 1, right? That's how I got to that 0.0671. But then you must times that by 100, so you get 6.72. Okay, so again, 3 marks for that. Okay, is that fine for question 1, right? All right, in question 2, you have to go the other way around, and they also have the word, okay. They also use different words in 2.1, so I will put that in 3.5, they say every 6 months. So that's not, I think maybe some of you did 6 times a year, over 600, right? So every 6 months is actually 2 times a year, twice a year. So this is biannually or semi-annually. That's what they normally call it. Okay, so just be aware of that. They can use different words. So they're saying they've given you an effective interest rate of 8%. You now need to find the nominal interest rate if it's calculated every 6 months. So twice a year. Okay, so I hope it makes sense that it's over 200 and to the power of 2. Okay, how many 6-month blocks are there in 1 year? 2 of them. Okay, so that's why you have to do over 200 and to the power of 2 is equal to 1 plus the interest rate that they gave you. And now, guys, for solving for R, remember this is the second example that we did yesterday. You're going to calculate that. That's 1,08. Right? That 1 plus 8 over 100 is 1,08. To get that 2 across, you do the square root of that. Okay, then I just wrote down what that is. You don't have to, but that is what it's equal to. Next up, you're going to minus 1 from that. Okay, so 1,03 when you minus 1 is 0.03. And next up, you're going to times by 200. Okay, so there are more steps in this type of question when you have to find the nominal interest rate than the first half. Again, you don't have to write this last bit here. You don't have to say that it's compounded biannually. You can just say 7.85%. Perfect. You get 3 marks for that. This one will count more marks, so you'll get a mark there. You'll get a mark for subbing in. Then you will get some kind of mark here for method. So for doing the calculation, they'll give you a mark. I'm not sure what line exactly it will be on. They'll probably just check, okay, did you show some working? And then you'll get a mark for your final answer. So this one will be out of 4. But again, if you forget everything else and you at least just do your formula and you just have it in, then at least get half from it. Any questions on that? Yes.
You have to stay compound design.
Yeah, 2.2. I will post this whole document again tomorrow. I think we finished the finance today and then this marking tomorrow, then I'll post everything so then we can see if we missed something. Now for this one, they said every 3 months, and that's just a bit confusing. That's quarterly actually, right? Every 3 months, you have to ask yourself how many times a year is that thing? If it's every 3 months, and that's actually 4 times. Okay, so this was the interest rate that they asked for is a quarterly interest rate, even though they haven't put the word in. So you have to do R over 400 to the power of 4, and that is equal to, again, it was just 8%, right? So this effective interest rate was the same for the first and the second question. So just to go through those steps again, it's exactly the same steps. So you work that out, that's 1,0. Then you take the fourth root of that, which is going to give you this value. Then you minus 1, which is going to give you 0, that value. Then you times by 400, which gives you that answer. Again, you don't have to write compounded quarterly, you can just leave it at that, just put percentage. And again, that will be 4 marks. 1, 2, some method mark for working there, and then okay. These types of questions, they don't ask them in a different way, really. The only different way would be if they're using terminology like this, where they're not saying quarterly, they're saying like every 3 months. Okay, but it will just be straightforward, applying the formula this direction or in the other direction. Any questions on this one? All right, number 5 was just like that change in interest rate question that we did yesterday. I hope that you guys tried to do it all in one line, like I suggested. So the amount that was invested here, I think it was an investment, was 10,000 rand, and it was for 5. What was this? Was it for 10 years altogether? Yes, okay, 10 years. For the first 3 years, it was 9% coupon. Monthly. Oh, for the first 3 years, it was 9% monthly. So guys, the monthly is over 1,200, and you do 12 times your number of years. Okay, please remember that. Maybe you put a 3 there in your exponent, then just make a note there. It's supposed to be 12 times 3. All right, because it's 3 years, but we are 12 months in every year. Okay, so this exponent is actually 36, not just 3. And then for the other type of interest, it was 12% biannually or semi-annually. I can't remember now what word is missing. So that's twice a year, so 12 over 200. And guys, if it's 10 years altogether, this was for 3 years. Does it make sense that the second interest rate is for 7 years? Yeah, I think you have to calculate that. So that's 2 times a year for 7 years. So 2 times 7. Okay, what you do then is you type everything into the calculator, press equals. It does take the calculator a while to actually do the calculator, and then that is your answer. Guys, for finance, they're never going to tell you how you must round, right? But money, we always work with 2 decimals to the same. Okay, so if they don't say anything about rounding, you can just assume for when you're doing finance, it's always 2 decimals. Sometimes they'll say like to the nearest brand or whatever. That's not common. Okay. All right, I copied the examples for today, like I said I would. So it is 2 on the page. Okay. Okay, guys, if you want to write the heading above that page, write that. Sorry, it's quite small. I'm just going to do my bubble around it. Okay, write that down, please. Sorry. Okay, are we ready, guys? Okay, we are going to write on top of that little example there. I always make like notes on the question. So we're just going to do these two examples, right? Example one was the one that we did yesterday. So that's why this one is labeled example 2 and the next one example 3. So guys, you need to read through this question very carefully. You might have to read through it a couple of times, which is fine. Okay, rather read through it so that you know what's going on instead of just going when you're trying to take time and you make a whole bunch of mistakes. So they're saying 150,000 rand is the positive. Now guys, that 150,000, that is the P value, right? If that's the amount that we are depositing, that's the original amount. Okay, so that is what we're going to have to use for P. In an investment account for a period of 6 years, okay, so that is the total period, but we know now with timeline placements, they usually have stuff happening in between the 6 years. Okay, it's not just a straightforward amount is invested for 6 years. So we see there they're saying at an interest rate of 12% per annum, compounded half yearly. Okay, so that's now again the first time that we see that terminology, but half yearly, how many times a year is that? Once. Okay, so that's the first what's the word that I'm looking for? That's the first type of interest rate that we have. So let's just highlight that. 12% per annum compounded half yearly. So that's going to be 12 over 200, right? for the first 4 years, guys. So it's 6 years in total, but for the first 4 years, it's at that interest rate. Then they're telling us we have a different interest rate, 8.5% per annum compounded yearly. Well, that's quite nice. Yearly, that's once a year. What is my interest rate going to be written as? 8.5 over 100. Hey, if it's just once a year, it's going to be over 100. For the rest of the period. So let's just write there. If we say for the rest of the period, that's going to be 2 years, right? So here for the rest of the period, this is going to be 2 years. Because it was 6 years altogether. The first interest rate is for 4. So the rest of the period is going to be 2 years. Okay. A deposit of 8,000 Rand, oh, now we have another deposit here, is made into the account after the first year. Okay, so that's important, guys. I'm going to use a different color for that. So a deposit of 8,000 Rand is made after the first year. So originally he's investing, what was it again? 150,000. But then after a year, he's adding 8,000 Rand to that. And then another deposit, lovely. Another deposit of, let's see, 2,000 Rand is made 5 years after the initial investment. Calculate the value of the investment at the end of the year. Now, guys, I strongly suggest that you draw a timeline for a question like this. Okay? Don't try and keep track of what's happening when, without actually writing it down. Even when I do these questions, when I've been doing these 4 years, literally 4 years, I still draw a timeline. Okay? Often in the textbook exam, they even say draw a timeline to represent this information, or like a mark or 2, just to kind of get you to figure out what's going on. So, guys, different teachers draw timelines differently. What I always do is I draw a line for each thing that's happening, right? Sorry, let me actually just make this thicker again. So I'm going to draw a line for my initial investment, and that is always T0. Okay, I'm saying it's T0 because no time has passed when I'm putting in that initial investment. Okay, when is the next thing that happens? I'm talking now about either next deposit or interest change. What is the first thing that happens after I've deposited 150? So the interest changes after 4 years. Okay, is there something that happens before that? What about this second investment here, this deposit? After the first year. Okay, after the first year, how many years have passed? 1. So I'm going to call that T1. Okay, so the subscript that I'm using, and this is basically coming from number pattern stuff, and we're using this terminology or this notation because we use it in the script. Okay, it comes up on the formula sheet and so on. So I just wanted to get used to that. So at T1, we invest in money. What's the next thing that's happening now? It's that interest rate that changes, right? So you don't have to space it out perfectly. It doesn't matter. The next thing is going to be at T4. Then there was that third investment, right? Which was made after 5 years. So let's do a T5. That the wording is very important here. Let's just read through that yellow part again and say it's made 5 years after the initial investment. Now the initial investment was at T0. Okay, so because they say 5 years after this, that is at T5. But if they had said, for example, this deposit is made 5 years after the previous deposit, then you would have to think, okay, the previous deposit is at T4. What's 5 years after that? T9. Okay, so you do have to just make sure of the wording. Often with finance questions, the wording can get a bit confusing. Right, so just make sure of that. And then is anything else changing? I don't think so. Hey, the only thing that they're asking us for now is the value of the investment at the end of 6 years. So we are going up to T6. That's 6 days. There you go. Okay, now we can, I don't know why, I think it's just how I was taught when I was at school, but I always just draw a line through the center there. You don't really have to even just have your separate lines. I think that just makes it look like one thing, but it's just personal preference. Now, what I suggest is that you do your interest rates on the first line. Okay, because the interest rate you're going to have to use for all of your investments. Interest rate is kind of constant throughout the whole thing. So for your interest rate, the first interest rate was, let's see, 12% per annum, half yearly. Okay, so we're going to work with 12 over 200. Okay, that was what the interest rate was when we invested that money. For the first 4 years, then the interest rate changed to 8.5. And what was this compounded? Oh, it was annually, yearly, all right? 8.5 over 100. Now, guys, if it's written like that, you can see very clearly for exactly how long, because we're going to put our deposits now in the lines underneath here. So then you can see for each deposit, how long was it invested at this interest rate and how long at the second one. Okay, so I really suggest that you do your interest rate right at the top. First amount that we invested was 150,000, and this was at T0. Now, guys, do you agree that that 150,000 was in that account for 6 years? Right? It was invested at the beginning and it was in there for the whole 6 years. So you don't have to do an arrow, but I find that it's quite useful to show that this amount is going all the way to the end of the 6 years. Okay, at the end of the first year, so at T1, there was another investment, another deposit made, and that was 8,000 rand. Okay, so we're going to put that 8,000 rand, and you can put a plus because that money is now being added to the amount that was already in that account. Okay, in the next example, we're going to do withdrawals, so then we're going to have to do a minus. Okay, so please put a plus there. Guys, that amount is also in the account for not 6 years, actually 5 years in this case, but to the end of the 6-year period. And then the last deposit was at T5, so that was 2,000 rand. So under T5, we're going to put a plus 2,000. And that is going to the end of that year, to the end of So how long is that 2,000 rand actually in the account for? Just a year. Okay, and just at this second interest rate, right? Do you see the first interest rate actually is not going to have any effect on this 2,000 rand. Okay, now guys, what we're going to do, I do understand that obviously there was 150,000 rand, it earned some interest, then they added the 8,000 rand, that whole amount earned some interest, then we added the 2,000 rand, but again, we don't want to do separate calculations, especially with these questions, right? It turns into an enormous mess. I can't even tell you. Some people spend literally pages trying to figure it out, and they always make mistakes. So we're going to keep trying our whole thing of doing it all in one calculation. Okay, so even though these three deposits went into the same account, we're going to almost look at them as if they were separate accounts, separate transactions. Okay, so we're going to say the 150,000 rand, what was this deposit worth at the end of the 6 years? Right? Now guys, this is similar to what we did yesterday. Yesterday we wrote out in one calculation if there's a change in interest rate. Okay, so let's do that just for this one, and we'll hopefully see what I mean. So 450,000. For 4 years, it was at that first interest rate. Right, so we're going to make one interest bracket for the first interest rate, like we learned yesterday. Then for the next 2 years, we're going to do our second interest bracket at the second interest rate. Okay, so one calculation for 150,000. We're going to say 1 plus 12 over 200. How many years was it at that interest rate for? 4 years. How many calculations per year? 2. Right, 12 over 200. So we have to multiply the number of years by 2. That's the first interest bracket. Now, like we did yesterday, we're not going to do separate calculations for separate interest rates. We're just going to put the second interest bracket next to the first one. Okay, so we're going to say the second interest rate was 1 plus 8.5 over 100. And how many years was that interest rate active for? 2 years. How many times a year? Just one. So you don't have to do it times one, but you can. All right? So guys, if I now do that calculation, it's going to tell me what the 150,000 rand was worth after 6 years. Okay, but that wasn't the only money that this guy invested. He also invested 8,000 rand. So plus 8,000 rand. Now we're going to do the same thing for the 8,000 rand investment. Now we need to be careful, guys, because for how many years was the 8,000 rand at that first interest rate? 3 years. Okay, so you see how the timeline is useful. From T1 to T4, that's 3 years. So our first interest bracket, 1 plus 12 over 200 is now going to be 3 years times twice a year, 3 times. Then the second interest bracket, 1 plus 8.5 over 100. That again was from T4 to T6. So again, just 2 years and 1 year. So now that second term essentially of the calculation. If you have enough space, you can try to put it all in one long line. Right? I'm just trying to get out. I don't have enough space. That will tell you what this specific deposit is going to be worth after 6 years. And now we had one last deposit of 2,000 rand, so we're going to say plus that money is also obviously going to be in the account at the end of 6 years, and we have to add that, right, along with the interest that it's going to earn. So that was only in the account at the second interest rate, right? That's very important, right? So we all see that. For just 1 year at the second interest rate. So that interest bracket is 8.5 over 100 to the power of 1 year times 1 year. Again, we can just write 1 day. Well, actually, because it's an exponent of 1, you don't even have to write that. Okay, now you need to very carefully type that into the calculator. Please, I want everyone to do that. This is the first answer. The calculator might run out of space. Not sure. Have you guys typed it in yet? Does anyone notice that? Sometimes they have a black block that's flashing. That means that the calculator is literally almost running out of space. So if that happens, let's type in the first 2 terms equals and then plus the next term. Okay. Sometimes it doesn't allow you to type anything. Okay, so I am getting this 296,976, oh, and then it's a bunch of 9s, 9992. I think we should round that up to 296,977. Right, because if you round that 9 up here, it's going to become 0. Round up the whole value there. I hope that makes sense, guys. This is much shorter than if you were trying to do a separate calculation for every thing that's happening. And I think also less prone to make mistakes. So the way that we mark these types of questions is we usually give a mark per bracket. Okay, so that would be 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 5, and then you usually get 2 marks for getting to the answer. One of those 2 marks can be moved to like if you like added the 8,002. And then this will also be CA, because maybe you messed up one of your 5 brackets, and obviously your answer will be wrong, but if it's following on from the mistake. So that's the simple question. Right, and I think if you understand the concept of having brackets, a different bracket for each interest rate, I don't think it's that bad, right? But you do have to read through the information very carefully, because that I think is where people can get confused. Okay, we're going to do the next one together now. Are there any questions on that one, right? Okay, I just quickly want to import this question. Okay, guys, example 3. Similar to this one, we're going to use the exact same method. Just now we have some money that's been withdrawn, not only added. But actually, guys, we're going to set it up in exactly the same way, right? There isn't a different method for when you're withdrawing versus when you're adding. Okay, so they're saying 60,000 rand is invested in an account. So 60,000, that is going to be our P value, our first P value, all right, at T0. Invested in an account which offers interest at 7% per annum compounded quarterly. Yes. So that is going to be our first interest rate, right? 7% per annum compounded quarterly. That's 4 times a year. So we're going to write that as 7 over 400. For how many years now? Oh, interesting. They say for the first 18 months. Oh dear, that's not right, I think. Okay, but it's fine. For the first 18 months. So guys, let's actually do that calculation straight away. 18 months, we need to think, what type of interest rate is this? Is it a monthly interest rate? 7% per annum compounded quarterly. So we need to figure out how many quarters do we have in 18 months. All right, so 18 months, let me write it like this, is equal to how many quarters. And the reason for that is because the interest rate that they gave us is compounded quarterly. Okay, so I'm just going to write that in brackets here. It was a quarterly interest rate. If they gave us a monthly interest rate, we can just say it's for 18 months. Our exponent, our M value is 18. Okay, but because it's a quarterly interest rate, we need to figure out how many quarters there are in 18 months. And guys, 18 months is what? How many years is 18 months? It's 1.5. Hey, do we agree with that? 18 months is 1.5 years, right? 1 year is 12 months, and then 6 months is half a year. So in order to calculate how many quarters this is, you can say 1.5 times 4 quarters, right? Remember, if we have like 3 years, we say 3 years times 4, because there are 4 quarters in a year. Okay, but now we're working with 18 months, which is 1.5 years. So to get the number of quarters, we're going to do 1.5 times 4. Now, guys, this is actually going to be our exponent of that interest bracket. Okay, 1.5 times 4. You'll see when we do it in the question. So this is going to be our interest bracket exponent. So like we would normally say like 2 times 4 for 2 years, now we're going to have to say 1.5 times 2. So because 18 months is 1.5 years. So that's already one spanner that we've thrown in more. Okay, but we'll put that in when we actually do our calculate. All right, then he's saying thereafter the interest rate changes to 5% per annum compounded monthly. Okay, for however many months are left after that. That's the word that out. Now they're saying 3 years after the initial investment, 5,000 Rand is withdrawn from the account. Okay, so 3 years after the initial investment, so that's going to be a T0, right? No, sorry, a T3. Oh, yeah. 3 years after the initial investment is T3. Okay, first deposit is going to be a T0. This is going to be a T3. They're saying 3 years after the initial investment. How much will be in the account at the end of 5 years? Okay, so we have to go to a T5 now. So guys, again, I'm going to set up a timeline now. We always start with T0. And that is the initial investment is going to be at T0. What was the interest rate that we had there from the beginning? 7% quarterly. So I'm going to write that as 7 over 400. And at T0, I invested 60,000. Okay, we'll fill in our arrows and the rest of the stuff just now. What was the first thing that changed? It was that interest rate, hey, after 18 months. Now guys, if it's 18 months, what's that going to be on my timeline? It's going to be T what? 18 months is after a year and a half. Okay, good. So it's going to be T 1.5. And what happened there is we had a new interest rate. So that was now 5% compounded monthly. So how do I write that? 5 over 1,200. Okay, then what happens? They're saying, I'm sure I was reading the first example now, I got very confused. Okay, then they're saying 3 years after the initial investment. So that is now at T3, right? They're making that withdrawal. So T3, they are minusing 5,000. So just like in the previous question, when we added an amount, when another deposit was made, when they are withdrawing money, we minus that amount. And then nothing else changes. They're just asking for how much will be in the account at the end of 5 years. Okay, so we're going up to T5. I'm just going to draw my line here on my timeline, but like I said, you don't have to. And then they're just 2 values that are being added and subtracted here, so we just have to do our 2 arrows to T5. So guys, like I said earlier, this question is obviously different from the previous one, but we are going to use the same method. Okay. Now, what I'm going to say now is that again, even though these were 2 transactions happening in the same account, we're almost going to view it as 2 separate transactions. Okay. So we're going to say this 60,000 Rand is in the account for 5 years. I know that's not true, right? Because he's taking out 5,000 Rand after 3 years. But just to simplify the actual calculation, I'm going to say 60,000 rand is in this account for 5 years at these two interest rates. Now, of course, this 5,000 rand that I am withdrawing after 3 years, if I'm saying that the 60,000 is going to be in, there's interest in that, in this last bit, that actually isn't going to be earned, right? Because there's 5,000 rand that's actually out of that account. So to take away that interest that this 5,000 rand would have earned, if it was in fact in the account until the end of 5 years. Sorry. I'm not only going to take away the 5,000, I'm also going to take away the 5% of interest that the 5,000 rand would have earned in these last 2 years. Okay, so see how I'm going to write this off. I'm going to say A is equal to 60,000, and we pretend that the 60,000 rand is in the account until the end of 5 years, because then that's a simple calculation, right? It's just like what we did above. We're going to say it's at 7% for 1.5 years. So we're going to do 1 plus 7 over 400 for how many years? 1.5 years times 4 times a year. Okay, just like we did above. How many years at the second interest rate? This is now from 1.5 to 5. How many years is that, right? 3.5 years, hey. You can always just do like a minus calculation. 5 minus 1,5 is 3,5. Okay, so it was in that account for 3.5 years. So we're going to do 1 plus 5 over 1,200 to the power of 3,5 times, now it's monthly, so we're going to have to times by 12. 3.5 years, but 12 times a year. But guys, this is going to give me the amount that I would have had if that money was actually in the account for the full 5 years. But in fact, I withdrew 5,000 rand. And not only that, in this interest that I worked out here, there are 2 years worth of interest, or there is 2 years worth of interest, sorry, on this 5,000 rand that it actually couldn't have earned because it wasn't in that account, right? So when we take away the 5,000, we also have to take away the interest that it would have earned by putting an interest bracket next to it. We're going to do again 1 plus 5 over 1,200. When did I take it out? It was at T3. So how many years worth of interest must I take away? 2 years. So 2 years times 12 times a year. And then you're going to type that into the calculator, and that is your answer. Make sure that you are minusing, right? Sometimes I think you get so into the habit of plussing that you might put a plus instead of a minus. That's what I'm thinking. So now how does that make sense? That method that we can just minus the 5,000. So that's why I'm putting each amount on its own line, right? I think it can be a bit confusing if you put the 60,000 and then the minus 5,000 on the same line. All right, it's a good idea to put them each on a separate line so that we do each amount separately. Okay, the same as with the top one, we had 3 deposits. Each one was on its own line, so each one was its own calculator. And guys, don't be tempted to do this calculation on its own and then this calculation on its own and then say the one minus the other one and get to an answer. That's again going to take more time and you might get into rounding. Okay, you're not allowed to find this answer, round it off. Find this answer, round it off, and then work with those rounded answers to get to. And you have to keep your values in the calculation. The easiest way around that is to just do it in one calculator. Okay, any questions, guys? There is one last kind of flip to this question where they give you the final amount and you must work out one of the deposits or the withdrawal somewhere along the line. So we'll just do that quickly tomorrow. But I want you just to practice some of these for now. So we're going to spend about half an hour tomorrow just on finance, and then the next half hour we're going to start revising. Okay, so again, exercise 2. And let me just see here. Number 6, 7. There you go, just 6 and 7. And then from the revision exercise. Okay, all three of these questions are like the ones that we just did. They do have often like a deposit and withdrawal mixed together. All right, so they'll have like the initial amount, then a deposit later, then a withdrawal later. Okay, use the same method, guys. Whenever it's a deposit, you plus the amount with the interest brackets. Whenever it's a withdrawal, you minus the amount. Okay, that method is never going to have to change. So please practice that method now while you're in class. Okay, good. Must I put the first two on the board, please? 6 and 7. Guys, like I said, these questions usually count a lot of marks, so it's a really good thing if you can actually get like full marks for these questions. It's sometimes 6, 7, even 8 marks for a question like this. So fine, can you guys read that?